Let's talk politics. Not Republicans versus Democrats. I'm talking church politics. Here are 12 strategies to help you navigate church politics effectively.
The Fresh Church Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Fresh Church Podcast. Today I want to discuss how do I grow my ministry in the midst of church politics? What are church politics that I need to be aware of? And why is church politics even a thing? Are you ready? Let's discuss church politics. So you've been wanting to make a change in your area that's been bothering you ever since you came on staff of your church, okay? You've asked leaders about it. They seem to be in agreement. It makes sense. You see, there's a closet in your youth room that has items that's stored for the funerals. Now there's tablecloths, there's decorations, disposable dishes, and cutlery, and you have no idea why it's in your area. It's the youth area, not the funeral area. And there have been times when you've gotten in trouble for having items in front of the closet because it's blocking its use. There have been other times that your team borrowed a couple of items from there and became a point of contention in your next staff meeting. You got in trouble for it. I mean, it just makes sense that this stuff needs to be in a different area, right? Well, there's a maintenance closet just off of the fellowship hall, the place they usually do the funerals. And it would make much more sense to put those items there than where they are in your youth room. So you look in that closet. Yeah, it's a little messy, but most of it is a couple maintenance items and then old choir outfits. And you guys don't even have a choir anymore. So let's take it over. You decide to help out everybody in the church, and you're even willing to do the work. You get a couple of teens, you get an extra leader, and you go for it. First, you clean out the extra closet. You move the random facility stuff into their actual facility closet. You just stick it in there, and you're not sure where it goes, so you just stack it on some shelves. You take those choir robes and some of the music that's in there, and you notice that under the stage, there's a door with a big open area. Now, it's kind of tight, but you can shove all of those choir outfits out there, and nobody's even going to miss them. They're still there. You didn't throw them away. They're just in a different spot. You decide to be thoughtful and wipe down the shelves and sweep out the closet. Then you start moving everything from the old funeral closet to the new funeral closet. Trip by trip, you plan on organizing everything and making it perfect for those people that do ministry there. Now, as time goes by, pretty soon the teens, they end up getting picked up by their parents. That other leader left you, and then your spouse calls, want to know when you're going to be home for dinner. So you rush. You got to hurry and get the job done, but it's okay. You'll come back next week and get it all taken care of. It's going to be fine. You have a new storage closet in your youth space. Man, what a great day this is. You can start putting your stuff in there and not have to deal with another ministry in the church. A couple weeks go by. You're planning your big taco eating contest at your next youth service when suddenly you get pulled into a meeting with your lead pastor. It would seem that someone has upset a lot of people in the church, and it would appear to be you. Facilities is wondering why all their stuff got moved, and now for some reason they're missing a mop bucket. Don't even know how that went bye-bye. Worship Arts is having issues with their amps overheating because the open space they store their amps in is under the stage, and it's now full of clothing and sheet music. But the real issue is there was a funeral yesterday, and Sister Baker couldn't find any of her things that her and her team needed to make this event work. She wants to know what happened, and they're going to be heads roll. Well, my friend, fortunately, those heads rolling are yours. You may have been a bit zealous, and you kind of forgot to communicate the whole thing. But what's the big deal? It's just a closet, right? And on that note, your future at this church is already looking a little grim. Church politics. What's the big deal? Well, I want to spend some time today talking about church politics, specifically from the perspective of an associate pastor. So if you're a kids pastor, student pastor, family pastor, and even an executive pastor, there are elements of church politics that you need to be aware of. We're going to talk about how to discover what church politics concern you and what church politics concern your lead pastor and how to navigate through these. I'm also going to give you some incredible tips at the end to help you navigate change in the midst of church politics. Are you ready to get started? Here we go. So what exactly is this whole church politics thing? Well, we're referring to the internal power struggles, the conflicts, and the decision-making processes within the church. So it involves the dynamics of leadership, hierarchy, and authority. And it can vary significantly between different denominations, different cities, different congregations. So I want to give you 6 key aspects to church politics to keep in mind for both you and your lead pastor. The first one is this: the leadership structure. You see, different churches have different leadership structures. Do you report to your lead pastor? Do you report to the board? Do you report to a committee? Who's officially your boss when it comes to hiring, firing, raises, etc.? Who does the lead pastor report to? And don't forget, there are influencers who might not be in any of these groups, but they still pull the strings. Make sure you know the leadership structure, because that often has something to do with church politics. The second one is doctrinal gray areas. Every church has a core set of doctrines they follow. And then there's the little stuff that might not be in writing, but everybody knows about it except for you. I've seen disputes over women in ministry, end times, creation, angels, men wearing hats indoors, and the list goes on. Some of these positions of your church might be hands off. So always talk to leadership before going down one of these roads. It will save you a lot of challenges. Number 3, financial matters. Disputes over how church finances are managed, including budget allocations, fundraising, transparency in financial matters. They can be significant sources of church politics. Well, this ministry always does this fundraiser. This ministry always charges for this. This ministry always does this for free. You need to make sure you find out what financial issues are there. Why do some ministries get more money than other ministries? Why do you get no money? Or why do you get all the money? It's worth finding out. Number 4, congregational politics. You know, in some congregational churches, members can vie for influence and position and control over church affairs. Sometimes these even lead to church splits where you've got 2 groups that have differing views. There can be power struggles and infighting that can come from this. Sometimes you need to be aware of it because they can even pit staff against each other, and the staff end up getting in this mess as well. The 5th one is personal ambition and rivalries. You know, just like any other organization out there, there are people who are trying to get a particular type of power, a certain authority. There's political maneuvering. There's conflict that can happen. Well, if it happens out in the real world, it happens in church as well. Even within your staff sometimes, like, does someone else on staff think that you're trying to take their job? Or is somebody actually trying to take your job? Or this one, who is pastor's favorite person? Those personal ambition and rivalries can actually cause all kinds of politics. And number 6, social and cultural issues. Churches like society at large may, deal with the issues related to social justice, cultural changes, moral values. And these issues can lead to disagreements and debates within your church. There might be some areas in your church that you don't know whether you can discuss or not. Something even as simple as, do we let people smoke on the property? Is that okay? Is that not okay? Those kind of things need to be talked about ahead of time. And you need to be aware, because you could upset somebody in the process. It's important to note that church politics can have both positive and negative aspects, but they can lead to conflicts and division, as well as creating necessary changes, improvements, growth in your community. Understanding and addressing these politics is important in maintaining harmony and spiritual health in your congregation. And remember that your lead pastor is also walking a tightrope with these elements as well. Sometimes their hands are tied. They don't have control over it, or they simply know more than you do in this situation. I remember a senior pastor telling me once that the best advice he would ever give anyone is to not touch anything in women's ministry for the first 5 years. I had another lead pastor tell me, don't ever forget that someone sacrificed their time, talent, and treasures for that thing that you want to throw away. And I'll never forget the grief that I saw a pastor go through because he painted over an unfinished Noah's Ark mural that was 30 years old, done by a lady who had passed away. And a couple of families actually tried to have him fired for it. How dare he paint over that Noah's Ark? So let me walk you through a personal story that I experienced. I was hired for a season at a church that brought me in to help revitalize their family ministry areas. And they had spent a lot of money to redo their kids ministry area about 10 years before. They got some concept art from a national company, but they decided to do the work themselves. Several families in the church, they got passionate about this, and they spent a lot of money. Some they got reimbursed for, some they donated on the different design pieces and the way that things looked. A lot of time was spent to create this Indiana Jones type style kids area. So when I came in, I found a very dusty stage with some broken elements from just misuse and time. And the theme itself was a little outdated since, well, honestly, most of the kids in the 21st century have no idea who Indiana Jones is. I mean, you can do a jungle theme, but you don't have to connect it to a movie hero that's outdated. And honestly, its context is not very appropriate, age appropriate, even if these kids were to see it. So on one side of the stage, though, was this giant wooden cross. It was about 6 feet high. It didn't fit the theme at all. It had thick nails on it that were covered in fake blood. I mean, it was pretty gruesome, okay? On the other side was this huge wall made to look like stacked crates and boxes with doors that opened for puppets. And as I asked it, it appeared that no one had done puppets in that church for almost a decade as well. But in the middle, there was this jungle hut, and it was in disrepair. It was unstable, that I was honestly concerned that a kid was going to get hurt. Beyond that, they were using themed curriculum. And this themed curriculum, this national company, had a new theme every month. So when I first visited, on the screen, they had space-themed curriculum, slides, videos, the whole thing, being played on a jungle-themed stage. Just didn't work. It was confusing. So let's make change. The lead pastor, he was all for it. Throw it all out and deal with the consequences later. The executive pastor, he had no problem with it as long as we, all financial decisions were run through him and we stayed in budget. That was fine. But I knew this church had a long history. And in that history, there had been a lot of change. And from that change, there was a history of church splits, hurt feelings, terminated employees. I was told right away of a story where they had a church split over what color of red the new carpet was that they put in the sanctuary. Okay, not whether it was going to be red or not, what color of red. This one looked more like blood. This one looked more like royalty. And literally half the church left over that. There was a battle over choir or no choir, a battle over organ or no organ being played, even though nobody in the church actually played an organ. So I went to work. But before I touched a thing, I asked questions. Who was responsible for what? You see, there's church politics even in a kid's stage. I talked to the current staff, the previous staff, volunteers. And as I began to share the current team some of the changes that we were looking at, I began to ask why the stage was made the way that it was and who contributed. Well, you might be thinking, it's just a stage. Not for some people. They'd invested a lot into it, and they couldn't understand that even though it was 10 years old, why would it need to be updated or worse yet, changed? And in the midst of that, I discovered that giant wall of crates that has served as a puppet stage was designed by a family who no longer attended the church. They had built the entire thing by hand in his garage. He assembled it there. It was literally like 12 feet wide, 8 feet high. It came in 3 different pieces. It was built well. It was quality construction. And they were so proud of it. The doors that opened, the way the puppets could interact. And even though this family no longer attended our church, now they did attend another church in town, but even though they no longer attended, they still had influence. They had friends who still attended our church. From time to time, their adult son would attend our church. Now, they were happy in the church they were in. They never intended to come back to ours. But regardless of which, I wanted to honor them in the thing that they had made. Now, I was told, just throw it away. But I didn't feel okay with that. I started reaching out to the other churches in the community, and I found a large church that had just redone their preschool area, and they had made a jungle theme. They were also looking at launching a puppet ministry. Perfect! Not only was this going to help them out, but I was going to be able to provide a new home for this piece of furniture. I let them look it over. They fell in love with it. I just told them, you got to come get it, which they did. Then I reached out to that family, the family that made it, and I let them know what was happening. I informed them that we were going to be redoing the stage, why we were going to redo the stage, and we were removing that item and giving it to another church. We were not going to throw away. We were donating it to someone else. I let them know that I personally thought it was an incredible piece of furniture, and I'd found another church to donate it to, and I gave them the date that we were going to give it to that other church. They were cordial and thanked me with just a little conversation. But the next Sunday after church, I see this couple talking to one of the staff in the kids' church area. I introduce myself and find out this is the family that had made that giant puppet stage. They were confirming that I wasn't just throwing it in the dumpster. They took some pictures, they asked some questions, and they let me know just how thankful they were. Crisis averted. Even if they hadn't made waves because they were no longer influencers, they still had friends. They still had contacts. And the other people in the church saw how I handled the situation. You see, they're still people. They have feelings. And with a little bit of digging and communication, we had a success story. And I can share several stories from the same experience, the same stage, that could have been a nightmare, but it turned into a win. And it provided an element of trust so that when we had to do the next thing, when we looked at the next project, I had the full support of the church. So how do you navigate through church politics? Successfully navigating church politics requires a combination of interpersonal skills, patience, wisdom, communication, and a commitment to the overall mission and values of your church. So here are 12 strategies to help you navigate church policies effectively. Get out your notepad. I'm going to help you out a lot right here. Number 1, build relationships. Get to know the people in your church, both leaders and fellow members. Building relationships based on trust and respect can help you understand their perspectives and their concerns. And remember, relationship comes with time. It always scares me when the new staff member comes in and in the first 30 days, they want to change everything. Man, I spent my first 90 days just meeting people, connecting and building relationships, because without relationships, you don't have trust. It's hard to introduce change, and you have to deal with a bunch of church politics if you don't have a relationship. Number 2, ask questions. Stay informed about the church's structure, decision-making process, and its history. Knowing the background can help you understand the context of various issues. I often use this illustration. If you want to know what direction a boat is going, you look behind the boat at the wake. When I get to a church, I ask questions not only about where they're going, but about where they've been. I want to know what's going on. I want to avert the crisis that other people have fallen into with church politics. Number 3, focus on the mission. Keep the church's mission and values the forefront of your actions and decisions. When you encounter conflicts, those decisions, then you need to consider what best aligns with the church, with their core values. Always ask why. And you can use the fresh values for that: family, relationship, experience, safety, and hope. Ask why. You can find these values and how important they are at www.freshman.org. And as you do that, it makes a difference in their lives. Number 4, practice patience. Church politics can be slow moving. Be patient and recognize that change often takes time. Practice patience. Avoid rushing or forcing issues, especially if they're sensitive or divisive. Take your time. I have another boat analogy I want to share with you. If you're in a small boat, you can make a fast turn and it doesn't mess anybody up. But if you're on a large boat and you spin that wheel, people go flying overboard. The boat could even tip. If you haven't been in a church, if you're in a situation where that church has been there for a long time, you need to make sure you take time when you turn that boat. You can get it to the right destination, but don't spin that wheel. It's going to cause all kinds of challenges. Number 5, open communication. I want to say it again. Open communication. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Encourage open and respectful communication within your church. Create opportunities for dialogue and listening, and ensure that all the voices are heard. So what does that mean? Talk to people and listen. Talk to people at different spheres. Talk to people in different areas. Talk to people at different ages. Talk to people who have been here longer and those who haven't been. Talk to staff and key leaders and people who just randomly volunteer, and then listen to what they have to say. Number 6, conflict resolution skills. Learn and apply effective conflict resolution techniques such as active listening, empathy, and compromise, believe it or not. Try to find common ground and solutions that benefit the whole church. It doesn't always have to be your idea that wins, but if it's our idea, it usually wins. Number 7, when it comes to strategies that are going to help you with church politics, know your limits. Be aware of your own boundaries and limitations. Not every battle is worth fighting, and sometimes it's best to let certain issues go for the sake of peace and unity. Number 8, and this one is key, respect authority. Even if you disagree with the church's leadership, that could be your executive pastor, your lead pastor, your board, the committee that oversees an area. It's important to respect their roles and responsibilities. Challenge decisions and policies is constructive, but do it in a respectful manner. I remember one time having to tell a staff member no on something that they wanted to do because I knew the church politics wouldn't allow for it to work properly. And I literally watched them curl up in a ball on the chair and start crying. And I was like, seriously? This is how you're handling this situation? There wasn't a respect for authority. The only respect they had was for their own personal views. Make sure as you're having that conversation, even if you don't win, you respect the leaders accordingly. Number 9, stay positive. Maintain a positive attitude and demonstrate a commitment to unity and spiritual growth within the church. Positivity can be contagious. That smile goes a long ways, and it can sure diffuse tensions. You can say a lot with a smile on your face, and people want to come alongside something that's positive. Remember, there will be a next time, and people remember how you responded the last time. Stay positive even if you don't get your own way. It's okay. Stay positive for the next one. And realize even if people get upset, a positive person goes a long ways in that situation. Number 10, and this one's really important, prayer and reflection. Engage in prayer and reflection to seek guidance and discernment in navigating church politics. Many believers find, solace and direction within their faith as they spend time praying and seeking God. And I've had to do this lots of times. Specifically, I was encouraged in reading through the difference between Saul and David. And when they would go to war, Saul just decided to go to war. David would always seek God and get permission, get approval first before he went. I like to seek God and go, okay, God, what do you want me to do? And sometimes God gives me some ideas that will help me through that particular situation. In fact, something that I'll never forget, a church that we were attending, the lead pastors were in the midst of trying to purchase a new building from another organization. And that organization had not wanted to sell to anyone. And so when they met with them, they prayed. And for some reason, the pastor's wife just decided, I'm going to make cookies. Now she's meeting with this large board of executives, and she walks in with a plate of homemade cookies. They ate the cookies. They loved it. They had a fun, positive conversation. And at the end of the night, they sold their building to the church to create a new campus. And it came out of prayer. Ask God, be quiet and listen, and then do what he says. Number 11, be flexible. Be open to compromise and adapt to changing circumstances. Flexibility and adaptability can help you find common grounds with others. If you're willing to give a little, they're willing to give a little. If you hold strong to it, they'll hold strong to it. In the church politics, they keep growing. Know when to walk away. In some cases, the best course of action might even be to leave the church if the politics are too toxic or too divisive. This should be a last resort, of course, but sometimes it's necessary for your own well-being. But know how to walk away from a fight and stay positive through the midst of it. Navigating church politics can be challenging, but with a commitment to the church's mission, its core values, to open communication and willingness to work toward unity, you can contribute a more harmonious and spiritually fulfilling church. My family and I have enjoyed watching this series, The Chosen, about the life of Jesus. And one of the elements that I've personally enjoyed is watching the pacing and timing of Jesus' ministry. I might have done it differently. I know his disciples wanted him to do it differently. He waited until the time was right for each piece. He knew when the disciples were ready to hear some things and when they were not ready yet to hear some things. He chose specifically when to try to stay out of the spotlight and when to be in it. When it was his time to shine, when miracles were public and when they were private. He chose when to pick a fight with the Pharisees and when to provide conversations to avoid them altogether. Jesus was a time of crazy politics. He had the Jews fighting over leadership between the different sects of Pharisees and then a separate group of religious leaders called the Sadducees. Added that the challenges of dealing with Rome and the puppet king that was put over them and a group of freedom fighters known as the Zealots who just wanted to go to war. People were looking for a Messiah to be their king, their deliverer, not necessarily their priest. Add to that economic hardships, cultural classes, and the tragedies of humanity. Yet Jesus navigated each step. I even watched the way his disciples responded from time to time, and it's a little humorous. Read your Bible again and look at how Jesus navigated the season he was in and the church politics around him. I guess in the end, he uses politics to lead to his planned sacrificial death, resulting in a new covenant that allows us to have a relationship freely with God. Jesus chose wisely. Well, let's be a disciple of his and do the same as we look at church politics and change. Use these 12 strategies to help you work through the politics in your church. Know that they exist and how to deal with them. By making the right choices, you can see your church grow even in the midst of church politics.